Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to explore one of my articles and the source material behind it in this new episode of New Sound. And anybody knows that on a news hound, I go through some source material. And this is a very important article. I say that probably about all the articles I write because I try and only write important articles. I know that sounds a bit repetitive now. Oh, this is an important one, but it bloody well is. I think I start every read through or every news hound with, oh, this is an important one. And it is because everything's for context. It gives you context. And this is one with loads where later on you will need some of this information for context about other things that will happen in the future. People don't realize how this works. People don't realize spy games. When you investigate in spy games, most people investigate spy games in the past. Yeah. Oh, it's the old things. Some guy poisoning some guy on a bridge, some guy doing some nefarious backroom deals with a Soviet back in the 60s or 70s. You know, so some sort of spy games always in the past because you don't learn about spy games while they're happening. But nowadays, we're entering into a new world. We're entering into a world of fifth generation warfare. And that means that you will hear about spy games. And spies will have to change their faces constantly. They will have to expose themselves. They won't you won't they won't say openly that they're spies anymore. They're just going to be newsreaders who are employed by an intelligence agency, or they're just going to be journalists who are employed by intelligence, or just going to be researchers who's employed by intelligence agencies. Now, I'm not sure if you've noticed the reoccurring theme there is that the intelligence agencies are employing everybody because that's how what they're going to have to do in the end. Now, let us talk about this article today. It's on UK Column. Support UK Column. Go and read the article. It's in the description down below on UK Column because they've been really kind to host this article, and hopefully there'll be plenty more. And they are really, there is no better place. Alex Thompson and other people at UK Column have been, as you will see in this article, have been on the Skripal case from the beginning. They know this case inside now, partially for other reasons. So some people knew certain people involved in the case before, and so they're extremely intrigued and want to know more. And I love their intrepidness, the fact that they want to know more all of the time, and they keep saying to me, "Okay, go on, go." If I say to them, "What about this?" "Oh, yes, 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 go, do it." Now, hopefully, like I say, there'll be more to come. I'm not sure if it'll all be Skripal, but there will be more to come from me on Skripal eventually. I really want to do a walkthrough in Salisbury and go to the places and work it out. Now, I'll tell you something that I've only ever mentioned a couple of times before about this case. I before when I was writing originally, I was and I probably will again, working in a hotel. And I was checking in a load of people, and I was talking to a couple about the Salisbury poisoning over different times, people who were from the area. And every time people from the area would stay, I would ask them about the information. I would say, I'm being bitten here. I would say, hey, what do you think about the Salisbury poisoning? And they would give me some form of information. And it was really interesting. The information was pretty interesting. And one person gave me some very specific information. They said that the poison that had been found by Julia by the two semi-homeless alcoholic Dawn. I can't remember Dawn. Was it Sturgis and something Rowley? But anyway, the ones who got poisoned after the poisoning, who had found the container the Novichok was apparently put in, and had sprayed it on themselves. And Dawn, I think it's Dawn Sturgis, died. I feel like Mark Rowley. I hate not being able to remember names. He survived but then he'd been put into hiding a lot. It all seems very suspicious. Well, someone told me that um that wasn't found in the bin that they said it was. I mean, they said the official story first was it was next to a canal embankment next to a bin, and then there was another story that it was in a skip that had already been emptied about 4 times in between. And then there was this story, which is someone said that in actual fact, it was found down the back of a chair in the Cloisters pub, in a pub called the Cloisters. And the Cloisters got shut down like after the events, and reopened as another pub. So that it'd be interesting to find out if there's any truth in that. But still, anyway, we're not quite looking at the events itself, though we will cover it here and there because for context and for other reasons. But the whole point of this was trying to find, it was fishing for spies. I went on a fishing expedition. I went looking for spies. I thought to myself, one night I was sitting around. I had just finished researching something else, producing a video, whatever. This is what I do. I'm constantly doing something new. And I thought about the Skripal case for a bit, and I thought about Pablo Miller. He come into my mind a lot since I found out about him because it's such a interesting connection. You've got Christopher Steele, who's the operator for who's Pablo Miller's operator, who's the handler for Sergei Skripal. Pablo Miller was officially supposedly in retirement, living in Salisbury when Skripal got poisoned. So apparently Pablo Miller was actually living in Salisbury during that time. I'm not sure if that's true. He is an extremely interesting character, and he is basically the real James Bond. He's really, really a guy who's been recruiting Russians and, using fake names all over the place and was eventually revealed. So when you go and look into the story, and Christopher Steele, for those who don't know, he wrote the Trump-Russia dossier. He formed that, and that was proven later on to be all like false. So he had manipulated the American election to try and defeat Donald Trump, and he's completely MI6. So it's like, what, MI6 committing operations now against, well, oh, he's retired and he works for Orbis Securities or whatever. It's bullshit. You KGB till you die, CIA till you die, MI6 till you die. There's no out. There's no out of intelligence agencies. Don't be silly. Don't be silly. There's only one way out. There is a way out. There's a way out. Christopher Steele might find that way out eventually. Pablo Miller might find that way out. Sergei Skripal apparently nearly found that way out. But I'm not sure about any of that. This is a long one. I don't know how long it's going to go on. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do this NEWSHOUND, and I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to start through. And so, starting off, this is the article. On UK column, Pablo Miller, the people working alongside the real James Bond. And as you see, you'll see a lot of these red lines, of course, sources, and that's what we're going to go through today. But it's worth reading the beginning so we can start getting into it. You may never have heard his name before, yet Pablo Miller is one of the most influential and successful MI6 spies in modern history. In this article, we trace some of Miller's known associates to find out a little bit more about the real-life James Bond. On the 25th of March 2000, a reporter named Ian Trainer had an article published in the Guardian newspaper entitled "British Diplomat Accused in Spy Row." The piece, which was printed on page 15 of the London-based newspaper, began by stating, "A Russian arrested in Moscow 10 days ago on charges of spying for Britain was a senior intelligence officer recruited by British intelligence last year in the Baltic Republic of Estonia. Russian counterintelligence said yesterday." Trainer reported that Russian sources had named a man called Pablo Miller as a supposed intelligence officer. Little information concerning Miller was in the public sphere, although he was listed as the first secretary political on the British Embassy in Tallinn's official website in 2000. And we also know that his exposure had become a serious concern for the Secret Intelligence Service, MI6. After all, Miller wasn't simply a diplomat. Russian intelligence was right about that. In fact, Pablo Miller was an extremely prolific spy and recruiter for British intelligence. Important to start that off. Let's go up here and move this over there, shall we? So the first, when we're talking about Pablo Miller, the first link on there is from also a UK column article. Again, like I say, written by Alex Thompson, Eastern Approaches website. Skripal, a Russian web or a Russian spy. Some contours relevant to understanding the possible roles of certain British intelligence officers in the Skripal case. This article does not seek to provide a hypothesis regarding what happened to Colonel Sergei Skripal and his daughter, who did it or why, nor does it reveal any intelligence information, although I am a former GCHQ officer who a decade ago was a close to immediate colleague of the whole range of key British and American officers covering the relevant fields. Russian politics, the Russian military, the former Soviet Union, and chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear CBRN threats. Indeed, I was acknowledged by colleagues as a good non-technical contributor on CRBN issues with a sound overall grasp of the issue. Rather, the below observations are offered to assist readers in piecing together what they themselves considered the likeliest explanation of the baffling events unfolding this week from Salisbury outwards. Readers are urged to consider and compare a wide range of commentators and whistleblowers whose track record they respect. That's a really good example. Now, as I say, Alex Thompson, who works for UK column, was a former GCHQ officer who knew many people who were linked in around this. So they were really interested to find out more. And of course, this article is one of the first ones that come out that you could say is probably going to be as comprehensive as you can get. Really interesting stuff, and it looks at Russia as well, which of course Sergei Skripal is listed on their website at one point, and it means that he was still working as a government agent. Look at that guy, yeah. Well, anyway, so that you can have a look at. But the original article that I talked about was in the Guardian newspaper on the 25th of March, 2000. British diplomat accused in spy row by Ian Trainer. And there you go. That shows you that they released that, oh, look, we found these spies working in Tallinn, in the Estonian capital, in the British embassy. And so Russian sources named Pablo Miller said he worked as a first secretary. So what does that mean? You know, you look at it and you say, ooh, what does that mean? Well, it means a lot. It means that we've got some sort of idea of where a major British spy was. Let's move this down a little bit. Where a major British spy was during the time that he was maybe at the peak of his career. A spy got unveiled by the Russians, and it was this man, Pablo Miller. So I said to myself, well, what does that mean? We know that in 1999, 2000, the British are using Western aligned embassies to hide high level operators, British Secret Service operators, spies, MI6. We can tell that because Pablo Miller is there and they've installed him as first secretary political as his cover. So, what does that mean? And this is the investigating. This is what investigating looks like. And this is really simple for people to say, okay, how do you find out more information? Well, as you see, I thought to myself, how about I go back in time on the Wayback Machine? Because the Wayback Machine is really good at capturing official sites from the past and documenting them. And this is one where, here you go, you can find the name of a spy written on a site just before he's unveiled as a spy. That becomes interesting, doesn't it? Because that raises questions. What questions does it raise? Well, if Mr. here, if sorry, if Mr. Pablo Miller here, the first secretary political in the Tallinn Estonian embassy, is a spy, then many more of these guys here are also spies? Because it's not like the intelligence services don't repeat the same mistakes or same behaviors, have the same patterns over and over again. And so what does it mean? It's a question for you. What does it mean? It means that we should look at all of these people, shouldn't we? So that's what I did. I said to myself, well, okay, as an investigator, I don't see why anybody else hasn't done this already. But why don't we just go through these and see what they've done afterwards, but also see how they portray themselves during this period while they're working with one of the most effective, efficient, and now going to be one day infamous spies in British history. We don't know many spies. We know James Bond. We know a few others. We know people who have worked for the intelligence agencies, but we don't know many high-level spies who are operating at this level and have been proven and outed to be spies, and then have had, have had major links to other people who are also spies and who are also doing major things in the world of politics, including trying to cause trouble for people like Donald Trump in the American elections, which seems like a bit of overreach from the British there. Surely you should leave the Democratic Party or Democrat Party do their attacks and use propaganda against Trump. Why would the British be getting involved in that? And of course, we'll see through this. There's a lot of propaganda involved, isn't there? Because the Cold War never ended. We stopped talking about it. So the staff list here in Tallinn is interesting. Her Majesty's Ambassador, Mrs. Sarah Squire, Deputy Head of Mission, Miss Kynwen Jones, which obviously is Welsh, First Secretary Political, Mr. Pablo Miller, the Third Secretary Political, so I don't know what happened to the Second Secretary, Mr. John Flint, Consul and Management Office, Mr. John Devine, Vice Consul, Miss Alison Carnes, Political Attaché, Miss Vicky Reynolds, Attaché, Mr. Alex Stalker Booth. We'll definitely look at him. Commercial Officer, Miss Neve Hobmuggle. Commercial Assistant, Marika Poldes. Now, these are interesting positions because these are positions that the people can pretend to do, but someone else could be doing. Miss Sally Flint is an accountant. Know-how Fund Aid, Aina Jurna. Now, that's interesting. Management Assistant, Karen Pula. And you see there's all of these others down here. A receptionist, driver, maintenance person, and all of that. And look. That's where the address is. That's the telephone number. I'm not sure if you can email them if you want. The British Embassy at Tallinn. That's where Pablo Miller had based himself. So here we go. Look at this. So we're translating this Russian article into English. The tax policeman recognized his recruiter. It turned out to be an old acquaintance of FSB counterintelligence officers. The spy scandal between Great Britain and Russia received new developments yesterday. The FSB Public Relations Center, PRC, has released the name of an MI6 employee who allegedly recruited former tax police major Vyacheslav Zarko. The recruiter, according to the security officers, is a career intelligence officer, Pablo Miller, whom Russian counterintelligence officers consider an expert on Russia. Right. So, as you see, 2007, this is from. So he gets outed in a case in 1999 2000 in Russia. And then in 2007, they discovered that Zarko, this guy, Vyacheslav Zarko, had been recruited by Pablo Miller as well, which is extremely interesting because it makes you say, well, he's really good at recruiting these guys. Former tax police major Vyacheslav Zarko contacted the FSB in early July of this year. He stated that he was recruited by the British intelligence service MI6. According to Mr. Zarko, political emigrant Boris Berezovsky and ex-FSB officer Alexander Litvinenko brought them together with agents of the special services in 2003. Vyacheslav Zarko, I'll say, claimed that he was recruited by several MI6 employees, including a certain Paul, with whom he met several times in London and Istanbul. Paul, according to a retired tax policeman, was interested in large Russian companies, information about possible influence of the FSB and non-governmental organizations, as well as mole Russian intelligence services, which allegedly started in the British embassy in Moscow. Mr. Zarko also said that he decided to contact the FSB after watching a TV report from the press conference of Andrei Lugovoy, whom British law enforcement agencies suspect of poisoning Alexander Litvinenko. According to Vyacheslav Zarko, having learnt from a television report about the machinations of MI6, he began to really worry about his safety. Oh, yeah. Well, MI6, FSB, all of them. You're not safe from any of them, are you? Yesterday, the FSB DSP revealed the name of the recruiter. It turned out to be MI6 personnel officer Pablo Miller, well known to the security officers. He became yesterday one of the most mentioned heroes of Russian television news. See the access to TV section in this page. The British intelligence officer, according to security officers, was identified by Mr. Zarko during the investigation of the case opened by the FSB investigative department under the article espionage. Of course, the DSP did not talk about the method of identifying the recruiter. However, they noted that recruiter Miller had already been involved in spy scandals involving Russians several times. Thus, in 2001, Reserve Lieutenant Colonel Valery Oyemyoy was exposed by Russian counterintelligence agencies and then sentenced to 7 years for high treason. Having gone into business after retirement, he repeatedly visited Tallinn, where, according to the FSB, he was recruited by British intelligence resident Pablo Miller, who then officially held the position of first secretary in the British embassy in Estonia. As Russian intelligence services later found out, Mr. Miller worked closely with the local security police department, the Kites from which the spy was supervised by Zoya Tint, employee of the First Main Bureau. The British intelligence services allegedly instructed Agent Arjame to collect compromising material on Russian politicians, find out the names of Russian agents in the UK, etc. And there's a little bit more at the end. My mouse is going crazy. Nice. Well, it's good when your mouse starts to go crazy while you're reading an article about spies, eh? Yeah, it's not that you can't trust them, but they're looking at my every move. So That was interesting, eh? Wasn't that interesting? Did you find that interesting? I found that interesting. It turns out that Zarko over here, this Zarko guy, admitted working for British intelligence, and that British intelligence was Pablo Miller, and the Russians are like, oh, we know Pablo Miller really well. He's a dirty rotten bastard. And so he's noted down a fair bit here. Um, in 2001, they mentioned Valery Ojame, and this is the Russian jail spy. This is from April the 23rd, 2001. It's from CNN.com in the archives. It shows you that they were reporting that Ojame had been. Oh, sorry. Ojame had been caught as a spy by the Russians. Other prominent spying cases over the last year have included the US arrest of FBI veteran Robert Hansen, last month's tit for tat expulsions of Russian and US diplomats, and Moscow's conviction of US businessman Edmund Pope, who was later pardoned by Vladimir Putin. It's always the businessmen who get pardoned. So that's also interesting, isn't it? From CNN, and this was the in 2000, the Honorable Christopher H. Smith of the House of Representatives, um, in the 106th Congress, second session, was calling for immediate release of Mr. Edmund Pope from prison in Russian Federation, and eventually Vladimir Putin released him. So, obviously, Edmund Pope, a retired American intelligence officer turned businessman, convicted by a Russian court in 2000 on charges of spying for U.S. Defense Agency, DIA, was sentenced to 20 years in prison for buying up and smuggling classified military equipment out of the country as scrap metal. Clever boy. 253 days into his custody, Pope was pardoned by newly elected Russian President Vladimir Putin, as the US government claimed that Pope had a rare form of bone cancer. Oh, I don't think he did, you know. I don't think he did, Mr. Pope. I think you're a liar. A liar! Skripal. So you can go onto UK column and you can see there's a fair few bits links to Skripal. They've really done some investigating into it. So there's 3 pages of articles there, including this one now that we're looking at the source material for today. And of course, looking at this, one of the reasons why I wrote this article is because you have a lot of articles like this, like Daily Beast. A lot of articles. You have a few articles like this where it's Pablo Miller, the mystery man who recruited Putin's poison spy. And so the Daily Beast, which I find to be a really interesting outlet, I'm suspicious of it because of their Epstein reporting and the focus around Maria Farmer, who's provably false by their reporter Kate Bricolette, I think her name is. And Bricolette is she's very clever how she phrases things, but when you know the inside of the case, you're like, you can't have got through this and not noticed without being not doing your job properly. So either they don't do their job properly, or they're on the other side. But this has basically a bit of information about Pablo Miller, and a little bit about his background. In 2000, the FSB identified Miller as the head of British intelligence in Tallinn, Estonia, and accused him of recruiting an FSB officer later identified as Ojami. So they outed him in 2000, and then in 2007 they said again he's obviously a spy. But they didn't include a picture of him, even though there was a picture to include. There has been a picture to include. And if we want to see, I did my own. I know they can't for I don't know if UK column realize they probably can use altered images if it's been significantly altered and overcome copyright issues. Um, and so you can see Pablo Miller here, here in the actual title, though he's got a rip through his face. That's Pablo Miller behind Pablo Miller, a Skripal, and a Steele. And that's the cover I made myself for the article. Ooh. Oh, I'm okay, thanks. So where were we? Oh, give me just 1 second. Just came off that page. So anyway, we're on the Daily Beast. And so this is also a little bit about Skripal's killer. It's behind a paywall. But the Times already been noted on a couple of occasions. And it is a very interesting article. I have looked into this article, but it's from a certain quote and made I think it's about him being given the name. Oh no, it's about the bank account. Because Skripal was, as you see over here, Russian intelligence had based another Pablo Miller's recruits in Spain, where he had been approached by British spy Sergei Skripal knew Miller as Antonio Alvarez de Hidalgo. And once he was recruited, MI6 gave Skripal the code name Forthwith. Skripal was reportedly first recruited in 1999 by Miller, and he soon gained access to a secret Spanish bank account which had been deposited with £100,000 to help sweeten the deal. When Skripal was arrested in 2004, he made a quick confession and cooperated fully with the FSB's investigations. £100,000 in a bank in the 90s is a good amount of money. Good amount of money indeed. So we going back in time though and understanding some stuff is what I do, isn't it? And so when it gets to the Miller's Crossing section, we talk about Pablo Miller has been transferred from the UK's embassy in Estonia in 1999. It was the following year that his name was first reported in the press, and before this point in time, Miller's cover was intact. Estonia had been central base from which to launch Western espionage operations at the turn of the millennium. Those based at the embassy weren't yet regarded as potential agents by anyone but the FSB. Her Majesty's ambassadors to Estonia during this time was Sarah Squire, whose husband was William Squire, and had previously been the British ambassador to Senegal between 1979 and 1982, and who then went on to be the British ambassador to Israel between 1984 and 1988. This is her husband. Sarah Squire had become the ambassador to Estonia during the very important period in the country's history, just as Estonia was beginning the process of joining NATO. And this is where we go back in time. So a letter from 1949 indicates Estonia wants to be a NATO founding member. So this interesting article from Estonian World looks at a document that was, I believe it was Dean Akerson, one of the founders of the New World Order. Yeah, the Honorable Dean Akerson. And asked basically the letter by Estonia in the founding NATO on the founding of NATO signed by Johannes Cave, an Estonian diplomat based in New York. I have the honor to offer my best wishes to the signatories of the North Atlantic Pact and to express my confidence that they, inspired by ideals of democracy, of individual liberty and the rule of law, will strive relentlessly for peace with justice, which excludes peace at any price. Therefore, I express the belief that countries which were forcibly deprived of self-government and independence will benefit by this noble endeavor, the letter said. And look, as you see, Estonia's expression of interest in NATO was formally noted, as shown in the response from US Undersecretary at the time, Dean Rusk, who later served in the Secretary of State for US President John F. Kennedy. Pretty important job, Secretary of State. But yeah. And there you go. As Estonia celebrates 19 years in NATO, a whole new generation has grown up with safety under the new alliance. As Russian aggression in Ukraine continues and Europe faces its biggest security threats since the Second World War, I'm grateful for the unity of NATO. But yeah, this basically the letter expresses the want, but says basically we can't because we're under communist control, and that would be nuts. But of course, during this time, they were starting to get to where they wanted to be. Now I don't go to this site often, but we can look at Johannes Cave. Died 1965, was an Estonian diplomat, a graduate in law from the University of Tartu. Cave studied at the Hague Academy of International Law. Very interesting man. And where? Oh, look, they're buried in a cemetery in New York. That's interesting. Not a surprise. And of course, what we're talking about here, written by Estonian diplomat Cave. So we see here it says Estonia is under the illegal occupation domination of the Soviet Union and is therefore prevented from manifesting openly its keen interest in this pact. Dean Rusk, who was then U.S. Undersecretary of State and who played an extremely important part in setting up the Marshall Plan, had also been made head of the Office of Special Political Affairs, known as the UN Desk. And so Dean Rusk's pretty important. And the Marshall Plan was, of course, the rebuilding of the Western world of Europe, really, as well. After World War II, they declared the Marshall Plan. Now, I've done some work on, including an article called Guido Goldman and the German Marshall Fund. And the German Marshall Fund was set up in 1973 to honor the Marshall Plan, and was really a way for CIA and CFR aligned policies to be introduced through NGO conduits in Eastern Europe to hasten the fall of Soviet-controlled Eastern European countries. Whoop! And there's your man, Dean Rusk, goes on to be Secretary of State for a while. Serves as U.S. Secretary of State, so he served under both Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson, both terms, or like the takeover of Lyndon B. Johnson and later. He was the primary architect of U.S. intervention in Vietnam War. Good guy then. Yeah. From 1964 to 1973. So after Kennedy had been knocked off, they incorporate this man to head up the Vietnam War, really, what's going to go around. Dean Rusk, what a bastard. Well, that's interesting. And diplomat Sarah Squires has been elected the new president of Hughes Hall, Cambridge, with effect from the 1st of October 2006. This was in 2006, and it talks about her time serving as a HM ambassador. She's also held diplomatic posts in Tel Aviv, Senegal, Washington, D.C. Of course she has. And she is British Embassy in Tallinn. She's the head of the beast. She's a head of the beast. Well, I should close a couple of these. So she's the head of the beast. We'll go and look at that beast now. But she obviously, you don't have people like Pablo Miller working in a place like that, and the head of the beast doesn't know what's going on. So it's pretty clear that there was some knowledge of what was going on, because you just don't, that just doesn't happen. So let's get back to this, and there you go. Mrs. Sarah Squires, Her Majesty's ambassador, and that's her elected president of Hughes Hall, Cambridge. And what's this here? What is this here? Oh, Jeffrey Berridge's work. Here you go. So this is about the Know-How Fund. This is the long-awaited history of the Know-How Fund. The Know-How Fund is, of course, a way to fund these sort of shady projects while trying to look like you're an actual reputable organization, which isn't connected to the state and isn't trying to spy and infiltrate your government, so it can eventually enact a coup and see the downfall of your people and watch as people get beheaded on the streets. That's what they like to do. Transformational diplomacy after the Cold War, Britain's know-how fund in post-communist Europe, 1989 to 2003. So at this point, this is 2013, they look at all of the funding, how they introduce funding into post-communist Europe from the moment of the Velvet Revolution onwards. Velvet Revolution was, of course, Czechoslovakia. And here you go. And someone involved in this has been working on something else. Here you go. Kane Wynne Jones, and she's a charged d'affaires, the British charged d'affaires at Tallinn, to the Director General to the Estonian Civil Aviation Administration. So this is about air services, and this is kind of the type of things that Kane Wynne Jones was involved in, who's pretty important, as you see here. She's deputy head of missions, so she's pretty important, and she's sorting out stuff to do with air force, of course. And I don't know what this is for. Squire's mission. Here we go. Jones was no longer with the embassy by 2014, and here we're going to get to it. By 2014, Jones is listed as a guest attending the 43 Congress in Sofia, the International Transport Workers Federation. She was representing an organization called Seafarers' Rights International. So imagine this. You're in a hotbed of spies. You are consider you've got diplomat cover, and after the one major spy gets rumbled by the opposition, everybody scatters, and you take up another post. Is that post also, when it's in the private sector or when it's non-governmental organization, is it actually just a continuation of that person being a spy, and they were a spy all along? Because this type of organization, the Seafarers' Rights International, is a type of organization which sounds like a brilliant conduit to create. But she's listed in here and in here. Kenwin Jones is listed in here and in here. And where are we now? We're on State Watch Online. Woohoo! So, State Watch Online EU, another secretive European police working group revealed as government remained tight-lipped about other police networks. Blah-de, 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 blah. And so this is pretty important. There's some interesting stuff, but let's go on, because that might be a little bit too early. We're going to LinkedIn. Why are we going to LinkedIn? Well, we're going to go look at a few LinkedIn pages. Cars. Well, think about it. Let's separate these screens up again. So I decided to go through each one of these guys. It made sense, didn't it? I've got this list, including Pablo Miller. So at the top is Sarah Squire, and then you got Ken Wynne Jones. Kane Wen Jones. And then the first secretary political was Mr. Pablo Miller. Now, Mr. Pablo Miller is a spy. We all know he's a spy. It is known now. So what can we do? We can assume that if he's a spy, maybe Mr. John Flint was a spy too. He's third secretary political, and if they want these secretary politicals to, if one of them is one of the biggest spies in the world, then there's a chance that this man over here, John Flint, expert on government affairs, security, anti-illicit trade, and anti-counterfeit, is actually a spy. Because before, what was he? Let's go back to the beginning of his career. Let's go back. Shall we show all of the experience that Mr. John Flint has been involved in? Then we go back to the beginning. And so what we're expecting to see. First of all, there we are. HM diplomat. in Foreign and Commonwealth Office, so the FCO, from July 1996 to May 2002. So all of these guys were rumbled in 2000, and this is April 2000 is that first article where they're saying all of these guys, this guy, sorry, is a major spy and the Russians have outed him. So what would you expect to see from a spy stationed at the Tallinn embassy? If you're a spy stationed at Tallinn embassy in April 2000, what will you want to do once the spy sitting next to you has been discovered? Get out of there, maybe? Let's say get out of there. So, what do you think he would do immediately? Say May 2000, so the following month. He would maybe relocate to become the deputy resident British commissioner of the British High Commission in Antigua. And get further away, can you? So from 2005, from a month after Pablo Miller gets outed in the press in April 2000, um, here John Flint is running as quickly as he can to Antigua, where he's going to hide out. Okay, well, of course, if he was intelligence, then we would see it in his career path, wouldn't we? Then, wouldn't we? What did he do next? Senior manager at the National Criminal Intelligence Service. Oh, could this guy be in intelligence? Because before he was the third secretary, political press and public affairs. He was public affairs, was he? Oh, and then he went on to work for the National Criminal Intelligence Services. Oh, that seems like a big jump. Then he went to work for SOCA. Now, that's serious and organized crime division of the UK. Police. So this is proper. He's multiple different over this period between 2006 and 2013 for 7 years. He's working for the Serious and Organized Crime Division here, and a senior manager by the end of it. A senior manager at the beginning and program coordinator. That's pretty serious in London. So he's a high level intelligence operator after he leaves diplomacy, high-level intelligence operator, Balkans regional manager at British Embassy, Sofia in Bulgaria, spying in Bulgaria, senior manager, head of tasking. This is a man who's been intelligence linked, and of course, then he goes to BAT. They've been around since the turn of the century. Global head of anti-illicit trade engagement, senior security manager. This allows him to travel around. And as you see, part of his job here was investigations, intelligence, and enforcement. This guy worked then for 7 years up until 2019. Is that 2019 up until? No, 2021 for BAT. And part of his job is intelligence. And then business owner of Beacon Bikes. Suddenly he's like, ooh, I'm going to set up a bike shop. Just a normal everyday bike shop. So that's suspicious in itself. And then he's a business owner of Flint Consultancy Services, like Orbit Consultancy, which was Christopher Steele's. Obviously, this looks like some sort of front for big companies and government-aligned people to come and organize their skullduggery with someone who can get it done. Multi-source intelligence gathering, international enforcement liaison. This guy is just obviously. So this is the guy who's under Pablo Miller. This is the next one along. That's how obvious it is that these, especially it seems like in the sectarian political classes, that these people were involved with. So what do you do then? Look, Johnson and Johnson, Consumer Health. This person who is like a virus goes and works for a big pharma after what we've seen over the past few years. Not a surprise. And presently, he's not only doing that, he's also director of global brands and protection, product security investigations and enforcement and customs at Kenvue. And Kenvue is probably on the next page. I've probably already opened this. Again, healthcare brand, probably attached to Johnson and Johnson, I would assume. But that's who he's working for now. That's nice, isn't it? Seems like a nice guy. Um, so this is an interesting fact that you see. Pablo Miller gets rumbled, and instantly John Flint moves across the world, hides out in Antigua, and then goes into high-level intelligence services that are much more public view. And then Big Pharma. So where are the spies? Where are the spies? Past 2019, the spies are all in Big Pharma. So some people were easier to find than others. Some people weren't really that interesting. I mean, not everybody. I'm not saying everybody at the Tallinn embassy was a spy. I'm saying a lot of them were, and if they weren't, they didn't like being outed, or some of their guys being outed as spies, or one of their guys being outed as one of the most major spies targeting Russians. That's a bit dangerous. So Alex Stalker Bruce, who's an attaché. Attaché. So there's just attaché. Oh, he's attached. Who is he? He's attached for the embassy. Oh, what does he do? Oh, he's an attaché. What does that mean? He does stuff. Well, Alex Stalker Booth now is the curator museum of Australian policing project. Worked for the Australian Federal Police. It makes me think that this guy went into some form of intelligence or documenting intelligence. So if we go back to you see, he's Australian. He's worked for he went to the University of Sydney and all that. But if we go back to the beginning of his pronounced career, what's going on? It starts in 2002. It starts in 2002, where he's suddenly registrar's administrator for Tate, for the museum. It's what? He's just suddenly a museum. But what? But you haven't mentioned what you were doing before, Mr. Stalker Booth, sir. You were working in a hotbed within a hotbed of spies. Why would you not mention that on your LinkedIn? Do you see where I'm going with this? I think you see where I'm going with this. There is two things. There's either an obvious tilt of former members of the Tallinn embassy towards intelligence, but there's also a reticent people who are reticent to talk about ex-employees of the Tallinn embassy who are reticent to talk about their time there, and so just leave it out of their CVs. And so that's what he's done. That's what he's done. Alex Stalker Booth has just left it out of his CV. Why tell people? And then he worked for Sydney Ferries for a while, and then he's a quality coordinator at AECOM with their free laboratories, and project administrator at GHD, and then he's the operations coordinator at someplace, and then contract at McGrath Foundation. Bet that's probably interesting. And Downer to get document controller, but eventually he University of Canberra art collection coordinator and policy. But eventually he's become this year curator of Australian Federal Police. So I feel that this guy, like, not only is he hiding his past, but he's also very interesting as a person to see where they go. They always seem to go towards intelligence dash law enforcement in some way, and he's proven that. Whether that is just, you know, that anything could be read into that is something else. I'm just saying, I was working for the Australian Federal Police after you've been in a hotbed of spies suggests that maybe you're still a spy. Maybe he was in the Tate Gallery being a spy. Maybe he was curating being a spy in amongst the rich, getting to know people. Maybe he's a spy. Maybe he was recruited. Well, you've also got this lady here who's commercial assistant. So I went and looked through these ones are some of the most interesting, because these people, you're not sure if that is a good enough cover. They might just be a commercial assistant, but then they've been involved in spy games if they've been located where spy is. And as you see, Marika Polders doesn't mention what she's done. She just says her experience as a trade advisor for UK trade and investment. So she obviously still works in the government sector or the public sector, but she doesn't mention what she does. She just says she's trade advisor. She doesn't mention what she's done in the past. She's still in Estonia. It makes obviously you think, maybe she's hiding it. Maybe. Who knows? But there's this woman as well down here. Um, Vice Consul was Alison Carnes. So Alison Carnes is coming. And here you go. Here she is. Policy Officer at Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. So she's still with these guys. She's working in Chigwell, England. And look, here she is. From 2018 to present, Policy Officer, Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. But nothing else. Nothing else. Interest, UK civil service and public diplomacy. Yes, but you haven't mentioned you worked with one of the biggest spies in history. So this is suspicious as well. You have your most recent job, you leave out all of the others when you used to work with one of the biggest spies in history. Suggests that you are hiding something. You're not showing something. Alison Kane's there. You can see her picture. Wonderful hat. Ooh, what a wonderful hat. That's what I say. And of course, you can't even understand. This is Enna Jurna. Now, this is interesting because she was a know-how fund aid, which is the way they were funding sort of projects that would lean people over to the West, say, oh, I'm a supporter of them because they've given me something. And she's the assistant rector to the Estonian Academy of Arts. So again, within the art industry, nothing mentions about working in the Estonian embassy with one of the biggest spies in history as a know-how fund aid. So again, what they leave out, what is absent, is even more telling in some of these situations than what they put into their CVs, isn't it? It's much more telling. And here we go. We're going to go another one here. Go Karen Pula, who was a management assistant at the Estonian embassy in Tallinn. What does she do now? What does she? She's an office manager. That's all, an office manager. Oh, she's got a bit of experience there. But and you'll see, where's her experience before? Oh, look, she went to University of Tartu from 1991 to 1996. She graduated, and then in 2002, she starts working as an office manager for Clifton AS. I love it. I love it. So it's just 8 years missing out your life there. Don't worry about that. So what did you do during that time? Oh, nothing, nothing. I wasn't hanging around with one of the biggest spies history has to offer. No, no, no. So Karen Pula, who is officially a management assistant, again, if you're not going to put in the truth and you're going to hide and you're going to put in everything else and then you leave out that makes me think that you think it's suspicious. Not even that I think it's suspicious, that you think is suspicious, Miss Pula. So obviously, again, like I say, we're going through each one of these. There's only a couple more here, or maybe just one more. We'll see. Nev Hobmagi, who's currently the senior sustainability manager in Baltics at Swedbank. So she's been there for 14 years and 6 months. Okay. Now, what was she doing here? She was officially a commercial officer here. Now, what happened? So she's again University of Tartu, 1986. There's a gap here, missing out of her career from 1986 to 1993, and then during the time when she's in. So she leaves the embassy of the United Kingdom in August 2000, so a few months after the exposure in April, and she becomes the government affairs director for GlaxoSmithKline for 8 years, and then goes on to Swedbank, where she stayed for 14 years. Is she a spy? Who knows? But she's left out a significant period of her life there, and that causes issues, doesn't it? That causes issues because you say, well, what were you doing during that period? And it's not necessary. If you weren't doing anything wrong, why did you leave out certain things? So, like the others have left out that they worked in this embassy alongside Pablo Miller, she's leaving out that what her past was. So it's extremely interesting. Swedbank is obviously a big organization. And you would think that a lot of the banking sector have probably been somewhat co-opted over the years. Just going to close a couple of these windows as I go. We know that money, intelligent people who are involved in intelligence also are involved in money because it pays. Intelligence pays well, and you need to invest that money. So, for instance, with Pottinger and Epstein, they were in banking in the early 80s in New York banks. So you can I mean, Pottinger was invested in Cyrus Hashemi's bank, who ran Iran Contra alongside him. And let's get back on. So we've looked through some of these people, and as you see, some of these people who worked at the embassy alongside, it's not just let's make that big. It's not just Pablo Miller. It's clear that there's about two or three spies at the embassy in Tallinn, and then there's a load of other things. It's really interesting. Now, I know that Blair's routing of the diplomatic corps caused a shake-up, a change that meant that afterwards people said that there wasn't spies there anymore within there. But that seems like a convenient um, point. But I don't. I think embassies naturally, historically, ambassadors used to come out. You used to have diplomats, spies. They're all basically in the same circle. And in the article, we talk about Mark Urban, who served in a tank regiment alongside Pablo Miller. I think he was his commander or something. And Mark Urban is the BBC reporter. I think he's BBC. Is the BBC reporter who covered the Sergei Skripal case. So covering like 2 degrees of separation. It's not even that far. You know, the explosive story of the poisoning. Well, this book, he was writing this book, Mark Urban, well before the Sergei Skripal poisoning had happened. He was already writing a book with Skripal a year before the poisoning happened, or the beginning of the year the poisoning happened. I think it was the year before. I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy. The guy who writes this book starts writing it well before the poisonings happen. Or work it out. Work it out for yourself. Mark Urban, dirty, rotten bastard is what I say. So there was lots around the Salisbury poisoning. And it says Skripals were under Russian surveillance. At least that's what the BBC is saying. And I mean, by this point, again, Mark Urban, who's a diplomatic and defense editor of Newsnight, conveniently knows a lot of these people who are involved in this. And Sergei Skripal and his daughter have been monitored by the Russian authorities in the months before the poisoning. They're creating a story behind it that it's all of the Russians, of course. I doubt that if they had been poisoned with Novichok, they'd be alive. Bullshit. I'm calling bullshit on the Novichok thing, but it doesn't make any sense afterwards. And Dawn and Rowley and how that worked. Give me just a second. I just do that. And here you go. This is Pablo Miller's operator. This is a guy who's telling Pablo Miller in the past what to do. Trump Russia dossier author gave evidence to UK intrusion inquiry. Report allegedly being withheld by number 10 contains submissions from ex-head of MI6's Russia desk. So this was complete propaganda. This was the British getting involved in the American election and painting Trump as being aligned with Vladimir Putin when there was little evidence to go by this. This was the one that seeded the piss tapes. I actually wrote a song called "Dump the Chump," which took the piss out of this whole thing. Literally took the piss. Golden Waterfalls. Universal fraud. He's chin deep in Putin's balls. Impeach the president. Yeah, it's taking the piss. It's a bombastic song on purpose because it's taking the piss out of the fact that they're trying to get him to impeach the president because of piss tapes and stuff like this when there was little evidence about it. But it's very interesting. Christopher Steele was the guy behind that because Christopher Steele, Pablo Miller, Sergei Skripal just literally just steps down the same chain, steps down the same chain. And again, Vanity Fair explain how, give me a sec, sorry, how ex-spy Christopher Steele compiled his Trump-Russia dossier. The man behind the infamous dossier that raises the possibility that Donald Trump may be vulnerable to Kremlin blackmail, which was bullshit, is Russia expert Christopher Steele, formerly of MI6. Here's the story of his investigation. If you've got someone who's a spy, then they lie compulsively to gain objectives. You can't trust them. So this is where you can see how the papers, like Vanity Fair, are in bed completely with the spy industry because they're like, oh look, private and confidential. We're gonna publish it like, oh look, this guy, he's real, it's true, blah blah blah. So they can badmouth and smear people. Of course, Orbis business intelligence is what he goes by now. This is the business that he's had since I think it was 2009. Heavily involved in so much what can be only be described as fuckery. And Christopher Steele should be watched very carefully. And again, look at this for propaganda. This is The Guardian. And look, they've made this weird Putin mock-up where he's speaking in a retarded-looking Trump's ear. And look, they've given him really small hands. And all of this is just insults. And in the background, it's like they're almost, the arms are almost like Nazi SWAT stickers if you look at them at the right angle. And there's their hands in the pockets of America and all of this. A lot of this is just how it works. This is left-wing politics. The left-wing Guardian newspaper smearing people by using a fake British spies, a fake dossier by a former British spy who was known, had already been outed as being a British spy. And Christopher Steele is a snide. He's a dirty little bastard, is what I say. They've got this picture of him here on these redacted. Oh, they love this. Christopher Steele, the man behind the Trump-Russia dossier. How ex-spy tried to warn the world about Trump's ties to Russia, but it was lies. So again, have they recanted these articles in the New Yorker or the like? No, they still put them down as look, he was connected. Why? Because this compulsive liar said so. I mean, there in many points of Russian history, you'll see that within the article. Go read this article. There's loads about little bits and bobs about stuff you wouldn't realize. And it's very important to read it yourself because I'm giving you sources here. I'm not giving you the actual details necessarily, some bits and bobs, but not the actual details completely. So we're back to The Guardian here and it says MI6, a nightmare scenario as rogue agent goes public. Britain's intelligence service, MI6, was thrown into unprecedented disarray last night when a renegade former officer published the names of over 100 agents. This is in 1999. Some said to be false on the internet. Of course, they're going to say some said to be false. The names on the website would be provided by Richard Tomlinson, the former MI6 officer now living in Switzerland. Government lawyers were last night frantically trying to close down the site as senior MI6 officers were mounting a desperate damage limitation exercise. So this is an example of Richard Tomlinson releasing a load of uh, names of spies. In a message to the Press Association news agencies, whose service is used by all national and provincial newspapers, he said, I understand that a US-based website has today published on the internet a list which identifies a large number of SIS MI6 officers. Publishing such details could put lives at risk, he said, adding that Whitehall was examining how the damage of this disclosure can be minimized. You can't minimize such damage, but this basically happened as when Putin was getting in. The spy game suddenly went out of control. They just started outing each other loads. Different spies started outing themselves and outing each other, and it led to a series of events of enacting revenge on different spies. So one of those spies who had the wrath of vengeance wreaked upon him was Alexander Litvinenko, who we'll see now. And that's not him. I'm just trying to load up the page. It's a bit slow. Archive can sometimes be a bit slow because it's under attack all the time. And this is from BBC News. Who was Alexander Litvinenko? Well, he was an intelligence operative, wasn't he? Who was working for the British at one point. And so the Russians poisoned him in London. Polonium was it? And he died. Well, these guys are all connected. This was all about saying, okay, the rules of the game have changed. Now we're entering into the post-Soviet era. If you're going to be coming here to spy on us, you're either going to be outed publicly, or we're going to poison anybody who turn against us. So that, by the time it came to Skripal, it seemed obvious, maybe way too obvious, that the Russians could try and poison somebody. But why would they try and poison someone who hadn't been effectively spying or given any information away of any importance or had any good information for like decades? Why would they target Sergei Skripal and his daughter? They would be his time was over, his heyday was over. He was already released in a swap. So it seems again like they might have he might have been under surveillance. They knew he was under surveillance, and they took the opportunity to fake his own fake an assassination attempt on Sergei Skripal, and then they could blame the people who they knew were surveilling him. Very clever, but true. Ex-MI6 officer Christopher Steele in hiding after Trump dossier. So Christopher Steele, they give this blurry picture there. Christopher Steele is believed to have left his home this week. Well, they can release that. Oh, I have to go into hiding. You're a bloody spy who's messing around, has killed people, and you're like, oh, I have to go into hiding because I told a load of lies about somebody. This again is another lie. This was all a propaganda effort. This had Clinton's written all over it. That type of operation, really dirty, dark operation. And the poisoned Russian spy was close consultant who was linked to the Trump dossier. Poisoned Russian spy Sergei Skripal was close to consultant who was linked. So yeah, of course he was close. Pablo Miller was in the way. Maybe that's Pablo Miller over there. Pablo Miller was in between them. They were close. They were all close. They all knew each other very well. And I can tell you, they all knew that the Trump Russia dossier was a load of balls, because it was. I don't have to be a defender of Trump to say, God, that looked like a load of balls. And it bloody well was a load of balls. So we go then onwards to True Publica. And this is really interesting. This is a few people, including Craig Murray, who explain that UK media told to conceal connections between Sergei Skripal and MI6. Craig Murray, the former UK ambassador to Uzbekistan, has published evidence suggesting that a D notice has been issued to the press to protect the MI5, hiding its connection to Russian double agent Sergei Skripal. According to the conservative government and the pliant media, Skripal and his daughter Yulia were poisoned in Russia with Novichok nerve agent. A D notice, Defense and Security Media Advisory Notice, is used by the British state to veto the publication of potentially damaging news stories, formally a request to withhold publication. The slavishness of the mainstream media, or slavishness of the mainstream media, to ensure these notices function for the most part as a gag order. So they're saying there that there was a D notice. Steele was responsible for complying with Trump Russia. So basically, there was a D notice. And this one will say local media again lost it. Local media, writes the Times, no patients have experienced symptoms. So the Moon of Alabama is talking about no patients getting symptoms, and talks about Craig Murray again talking about some of about this stuff. And here you see in is this third person the MI6 agent? So wait a minute, let's see what the sentence. Consider, for example, this picture which shows Mrs. Skripal and his daughter Yulia, presumably in the pub or restaurant they visited before they collapsed. Who is the third person visible in the mirror between them who took the picture? Oh, he does look like Pablo Miller. In this third, in this third person, the MI6 agent Pablo Miller, who in 1995 recruited Skripal as British double agent. Miller, who was also involved in handling the MI6 assets Boris Berezovsky and Alexander Litvinenko. Pablo Miller, who lived close to Sergei Skripal in Salisbury and is considered to be his friend. The same Pablo Miller who worked with former MI6 agents Christopher Steele's Orbis Business Management, which created a dirty dossier about Donald Trump. How deep were the Skripals involved in making up fake stories in the anti-Trump dossier, for which the Clinton campaign paid more than $168,000? Did the Skripals threaten to talk about the issue? Is that why the incident happened? So the thing, but this is this guy here, Pablo Miller. Could be. There you go. Could be just he does like he has. It does look like he's sitting at the table, but it could just be the manager of the restaurant. These two smiling away, about to be very famous. And this page explains what a D notice is. And DA notices from 1993 to 2010. D notices were introduced in 1912 and run as a voluntary system by the Joint Committee headed by the Secretary of the War Office. That's interesting. Well, I think it's interesting. And here, Alex Thompson. Now, this isn't Alex Thompson who works in UK column. This is Alex Thompson, the Channel 4 journalist. Actually, appears in a NEWSPASTE I just released. I just happened to be him in there, and I didn't notice, just did it, and then I realized afterwards. But anyway, about the only decisive public move by the authorities has been to censor MSM via a D notice last week from fully identifying Mr. Skripal's MI6 handler living nearby. So they were blocked. The D notice was specifically for hiding Pablo Miller's identity. Specifically for hiding Pablo Miller's identity. So he was obviously living around Salisbury and quite close to Skripal. And look, they denoticed him. Good. Denotice some good. However, there was someone who says no denotice here, and of course they've released that, and that's where the Moon of Alabama was because D notice didn't apply to American newspapers, which is why I had the Moon of Alabama article up. And so basically, there's the last source in the UK column article is actually about artificial intelligence, and it's a positive outlook on where there's no will, there's no way, why artificial intelligence will never rule the world. That's partially because of my closing gambit. Is that what you would say? Let's wait 1 second. It's partially because of my closing gambit in the piece, was that, you know, this what I saw here was the opportunity to check whether a place which had been a hotbed I suspected as being a hotbed for spies, a orbiting state of which used to be a satellite of the USSR, sitting next door to Russia with one of the biggest spies in history proven to be sitting in there. Surely that means that other spies were in there. Think about this. Think about this. It's those type of things that lead you on to the next thing. Because if I had gone through all of, and there still may be more to find in this case, but if I'd gone through all of those different people and discovered that some of them had been doing nefarious things in certain cases afterwards, or been involved in certain cases afterwards, then I'm aware that they potentially have intelligence links, and that's where the cases go. So I'm looking for other things, but I found that an amazing sort of point of history when times were changing. There was a reset happening. They had to change the diplomatic services. Putin came in. The Russians were more capitalistic in their approach, and everything became very serious. Spies were being outed on both sides, and everything was being called out. They could no longer keep going with the Cold War tactics. Those days were basically over, and it was about getting rid of the people who had betrayed Russia and who had betrayed other countries, getting rid of them by their opposing or the people who they betrayed, services they betrayed. So Litvinenko, we saw his puppy dog face, but he would have been responsible for spying, for potential deaths, for other things. So don't cry for him. Yeah, you show his wife and all, he was poisoned and etc. etc. But he's a spy. If you live by the sword, you die by the sword. That's the spy game. You live by the spy game, you die by the spy game, and that happened to Litvinenko. He died by the spy game. That happened to other people involved. They died by the spy game. You got to be careful if you're playing a spy game. So before the Reformation of the embassies and stuff by Blair and the like, a lot of these, that's where the best base was for operatives. So that's a really interesting thing that's much different now. And now there's not really the same level of diplomacy as we had back then. We had peaceful times. Now we're on the edge of having a war against Russia. That's created. That's partially created. It has to be created, doesn't it? Has to be. The dynamic changed, and they had to create a new dynamic. And that new dynamic is to make people think that the other side has done something when they haven't. That's what it appears to be. So whether Sergei Skripal was actually poisoned or not is another thing. But by the sounds of it, Pablo Miller was still aligned with him and was probably still doing low-level operations all around the place. It was really kind of like an adventure to look through all of this and try and find something new in the Skripal case, because everybody had looked through so much. And it makes me realize that method of going through the place where is a hive for intelligence activity like embassies is really useful, especially during that period, which Internet archives still exist for them. So you got the embassy in Estonia, and the embassy in Lithuania, and the embassy in Latvia, and the embassy in all these different embassies. You can probably find a little spy here and a little spy there all over the place. And that's why they had to be moved eventually. What's the point of having a load of little spies here, little spies there, if everybody's going to be rumbled at the end of it? So there was a lot of rumbling going on. And people got rumbled. So but you got to go through this game, and the game has now changed in the near future. And I think the reason why they've, like, Christopher Steele came out with the Trump Russia dossier and was so obvious and so overt about it, was because Spygate is gone. My thought is that the intelligence will use an array of different tools that are mainly cyber related to push people in certain directions and make people do certain things. You won't have the same sort of spy games as you had before. Eventually, you won't even know whether or not it's a human or a robot who's convincing you to do the stuff. You'll just be doing the stuff or not doing the stuff. So when that period comes, and you expect to see an increase in a different form of spy game, a spy game that we see more now, one that means that old time assets, physical people, physical assets aren't necessary in the set to use to meet the same goals and within the same functions anymore. You can get other spies, you can get AI spies, you can work out what everybody's doing, you can compromise people by using AI. And I'm not even talking about, even though that article said why AI will never take over. No, I don't believe in artificial general intelligence or artificial super intelligence. I believe in artificial narrow intelligence. That's all they've been able to prove. But what you'll be able to see is artificial narrow intelligence is indistinguishable from magic. It's so complex, and it can work in such a way that we don't understand, that even the low level, currently what we're developing within artificial intelligence, can eventually do the job of compromising people for the intelligence services without even an agent or human being involved with their mark and target. So that's what I was kind of rolled out on. But I ask you, I implore you to go and support UK Colin by going and reading the article and having a proper look through it. It's in the description, of course, and it's a really important trek through a case which I think people don't realize there's so much more to be found on it. So much more. People don't realize. So, whether I'll have the time this year to take on the Skripal case this coming year, because this coming year I've got some big cases happening. I think that eventually someone will look at some part of this and go, my God, if that means that, look at this piece of information, and it'll open up a new thing that we don't know about. Because these people were really important. Christopher Steele, Pablo Miller, Sergei Skripal, these three people were extremely important movers and shakers within intelligence services affecting the United Kingdom and Russia. Three very important people, and they would have done a lot more. And that's it. I think that'll do of this NEWSHOUND on Pablo Miller, the people behind the rise. I can't remember what the actual title's called. Behind the real life James Bond. The people who helped support him, the people who were employed alongside him, his colleagues. These guys go on to do stuff with, elsewhere, and some of them get out very early. But it's been an interesting little ride. Thanks for paying attention. Go read it. Support my work. I got a docu series coming out called Searching for Stanley. It's good. It's rocking. It's got one hell of a soundtrack. It'll be made into parts and then into one bulk. A project that I'm really passionate about at the moment. As long as I can get over certain copyright issues, then every episode will be out. Otherwise, there may be one episode that won't be able to go out with all of the rest just due to copyright. But we'll see. Other than that, it's a very interesting docu-series that looks through each of the events that Stanley Pottinger was involved in, including Martin Luther King, Orlando Letelier, Watergate, Wounded Knee, and more. Kent State Massacre, and his girlfriend Gloria Steinem. Really interesting. If you want to support this work, I'd appreciate it. Hey, come to my Patreon and you'll get early access. You'll already be able to view some of the um, drafts and final edits for Searching for Stanley, which isn't out yet. So if you want to get a sneak peek at some of these things, then the only way to do it is by becoming a Patreon or a member on YouTube. But basically, my Patreon seems to be the center, or you can buy me a coffee. That's newspace.com or johnnyvedmore.com. You'll find links to being able to do that. Support my work because I need to remain independent if I'm going to be effective and efficient. And there's a lot of work involved in this spy chasing business. So please, I'm Johnny Vedmore. This has been New Sound.
What we know is that we will end up with many more unemployed